Hi friends, Sam here with Happily Hooked. So we are back, and this week we are learning how to make the perfect square. So when I first started out with crocheting, I had a ton of problems where my squares would kind of look like parallelograms and not so much square, and I'm super excited to show you guys how to do that and how to keep your edges straight. This one is so useful because the square can be just a little teeny tiny square, or you can make it to be an entire rectangle for the back of your cardigans or your sweaters or whatever you're working on. So it's a really good skill to have on deck for you. So grab your favorite yarn, grab your favorite hook that corresponds with that yarn, and we're gonna get started. Hi friends, real quick, if you guys want to find out how to join the coolest crochet community on the internet, make sure you check out the link in the description below, and I cannot wait to see you in the community. Alright, so like I said, today we are learning how to make a perfect square. So these are super fun, super easy. I like, if you're not really in like the granny square mood, I like using these little tiny squares to make blankets out of, and you can just use up your scrap yarn. But this is just a really easy way to make a perfect little square where you don't have like wonky edges and the bottom doesn't curve in. So I'm going to show you a couple tips and tricks on how to make that for you. It's really simple. Now obviously the way that I do it might be a little bit different than the way you were taught or the way you're comfortable with, and that's okay. This is just my experience with it. So I'm going to show you how I make my perfect little square. So today I'm just using a 5mm crochet hook. I love this one. It's one of my favorites. I don't know if you can see, but it's quite worn down where I always use it. And then I've just got some Red Heart Super Saver. This is what we've been using for all these tutorials, and this is in the color Tea Leaf, and then my scissors. So for me, all I do when I start is I make my little slip knot. And then for this one, for the example, I'm going to chain 15. So we're just going to chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we've got our little chain. And now my trick here for this one, what we do is instead of going into the top stitch, like the top part that normally a lot of people go into, we're going to turn our chain around and we're going to go into these bumps on the back. So I'm going to yarn over, and then I'm going to go into this first bump on the back. And it is a little bit tricky, especially if you crochet your chain tighter. But this is going to prevent the bottom of your square from curling in. So normally if you crochet in the front part of the stitches, the bottom of your square will kind of bow in instead of being straight. So it'll kind of look like this at the bottom because it's tighter. So we're just going to work in the back bumps, and I'm working with half double crochets for this square. Half double crochets are my favorite stitch. I use them for pretty much everything. But yeah, so we're just going to go in through the back bumps. So not in the front of the stitches, but in these bumps here in the back. And like I said, it can be a little bit tricky, especially if your chain is tight, and that's okay. You'll get there, I promise. My hook, if you can see, is a little bit more pointed. Makes it a little bit easier for me. And you can always like grab your stitches if you can't seem to get into that back bump. So you can just grab a hold of it and put it on your hook. Alright, so we've got our foundation starting bottom part, and see how that stayed nice and straight right there at the bottom. There's no curve or anything like that. It's just nice and straight. Now my trick for keeping my sides even, and this is, you'll see, I don't know, a lot of patterns will call, especially if you're working with a half double crochet, is you'll chain 2. I only chain 1. I only ever chain 1. I do the same thing with double crochets. I only chain 1. And then I just start working back into that next row. So I chain 1, I turn my work, or you can turn your work and then chain, it really doesn't matter. And then I start going into my next row. So I only chain 1, and for some reason for me, that just keeps my edges nice and straight. There's no big holes there, and I don't count my chain 1 as a stitch. I just ignore it, and then I just go back into that first stitch here. So we'll go back, and then so I did my chain 1, I turn, and then I go right into that first stitch. I don't skip a stitch. I go right into the first stitch and start my next row of half double crochets. And for me, this just keeps my edges nice and straight. It keeps everything from curving or getting wavy or anything like that. And it prevents me from having to like extra block things. And then I just keep doing that for the rest of my square for as long as I want it. If I want to turn it into a perfect square, I'll keep going. If I want to turn it into a rectangle, I'll keep going. And then you just want to make sure when you get to the end of the row, it's gonna look like there's a stitch here that you're not supposed to go into, like this might be the chain, but you still go into that stitch. So you still go into it and make your stitch, because the chains don't count. We're not counting the chains. So that way we'll still have our 14 stitches across, because we chained 15 and now we have 14. So like you can see here, it kept the bottom nice and pretty, and you can see how nice those stitches look. And then we just keep going. So we did our chain 1 and we turned, and then we just go right into that first stitch and we keep going. And for me, it just works better that way. Like I said, I do the chain 1 trick also with my double crochets. I know it doesn't make sense, but that just works for me. It keeps there from being a big gap at the end of each row or at the beginning of each row. I just like how it looks. And obviously that's gonna work different for everybody. You do what you're comfortable with. This is just what works for me. So I'm at the end, and I'm still gonna go into that last stitch. And then I chain 1 and I turn. But yeah, so that's how I make these little squares. I mean, you can block them out, stretch them out, and make them a little bit bigger if you want to. But I know that I've made a perfect square when I can fold that triangle in half and it's even on both sides. So my finished square, if you count, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rows of 14 stitches across. And that made us a perfect little square. So when you fold triangle or corner to corner and you line up those edges, you can see that it is a perfect square. So yeah, if you have any questions for this or any tips that you like to use to keep your squares straight, just let me know in the comments below. These are a lot of fun. Like I said, I like to make little blankets out of all the different squares. I've got a couple of them started. I obviously haven't finished them because you guys know how I am with blankets. But just let me know. I really like them. They do make really good coasters too, especially if you use cotton yarn, so that way it absorbs the water or whatever the condensation is. They work really well. But yeah, I hope you guys like this little tutorial, and if you have any questions or any comments, just leave those in the comments below and I will get back with you guys, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys!